Since watching The Lord of the Rings as a child, I always wanted to visit New Zealand and the movie locations. This dream became a little bit more realistic in the past years, so I began researching where the film locations are. Finding the locations was not always easy. I often only found rough locations and not exact coordinates. For research I used two books, the behind the scenes, interviews with actors and crew, the internet and much more. But after a long research I went on my adventure through Middle-earth. In this video I will not only show you the locations but also provide additional information. In the video description you will find a link with exact GPS coordinates for all locations as well as information on how to access the locations. I tried to make a picture of each location from the same angle as in the movies, but that was not always possible, as often the shots were done from a helicopter, crane or on private land. This video can serve as a guide or just as entertainment to see some familiar locations more than 2 decades after they were used as a filming location by Peter Jackson. Keep in mind that a lot of shots were done in a studio or are CGI, and even then my list is not complete, but I think I covered the majority of locations which you can publicly access. So let's start with the Fellowship of the Ring. The first location is at Wakapapa ski field, which is located in the middle of the North Island at Tongariro National Park. Here they filmed some scenes of the War of the Last Alliance in the prologue. Driving up to this volcanic location, you can already see that it very much looks like Mordor. They filmed a lot of scenes with large blue screens and some scenes are completely CGI, but you can still find some spots. For example, when the archers shoot their arrows or when Gil-galad kills an orc. The scene where Isildur cuts the ring of Sauron's hand was also filmed here, but as the scene is only close-ups and a lot of CGI, it's very hard to find. The next scene was filmed in Arrow Town in the South Island. In a little forest they filmed the scene at Gladden Fields where Isildur is killed by orcs. A lot of trees were locked down, so it looks quite different now. Near Matamata on the North Island is the most famous of all filming locations, the Hobbit movie set. The set took months to build, and after it was finished, the plants could grow for a year, just so that everything looks a little bit more organic. You need to buy a ticket for a guided tour to visit this location. Even with the amount of people visiting, it's a magical place and a must-see for every Lord of the Rings fan. You will find all the Hobbit outdoor sets from the films here. The party field, the windmill, the green dragon and of course Bag End. We were here on the exact date on which they opened the inside of 2 hobbit holes, which are filled with a lot of lovely details. North of Wellington you will find Hardcore Park. This location served as the Isengard Gardens, for example when Gandalf rides under a bridge or when he talks to Saruman outside of Orthanc. Some trees were artificial, the mountains in the background are not here and the vegetation changed quite a bit over the last 2 decades, so it's quite hard to see where they actually filmed, but you can still recognize some of the trees if you look closely. Our next destination brings us to a park at Mount Victoria in Wellington. The locations here are easy to find, as the park is in the city and a lot of fans come here. There are even signs to the locations. Here they shot the scenes when the Hobbit leave the Shire. For example when Frodo is smoking on a tree, when they fall off a hill and of course the famous scene where they first meet the Nazgul. The big tree trunk was only a movie prop, so you will have to use your imagination here. 600 kilometers further north you will find beautiful landscapes with a lot of grass and rocky hills. One of those hills was used to film Weathertop. The hill is on private land, so we just took a picture from the road. You can recognize the hill from here and it looks exactly like in the movies, except for the ruins on top. Back on the South Island near a town called Taros, they shot the horse riding scenes between Arwen and the Nazgul. This is also on private land, but there is a public road from which you can see the area. In Arrow Town, where we already were, they also shot another scene. It's the one where Arwen faces the Nazgul in the river. But this location was only used for close-ups, I think because the water here is not very deep and it was therefore easier for the horses to get in. The more famous spot was filmed at Skipper's Canyon not too far away from here, but as this road is forbidden for rental cars, we had to skip this location. North of Wellington you will find Kaitoki Regional Park. Already from the road you can see what was filmed here because there are signs. This was the place where they shot the outdoor scenes of Rivendell. They built the sets around the trees and even built an artificial river. It is hard to recognize as the place looks a lot different now, but there are some signs which try to give you some kind of orientation. You will even find an archway, but it is not the original one. This one here was put here as a gift to visiting fans years after shooting. Near Wanaka on the South Island, you will find the hill where the Fellowship is walking south after leaving Rivendell. You can recognize the hill you see in the background of the scene, but to find the exact hill where the actors walked on is hard, because most of the rocks are now covered with grass, and the scene was shot from a helicopter. On the northern part of the South Island, you will find one of the most beautiful movie locations. It is on Mount Olympus, and it is so remote that we had to take a helicopter ride to get there. The flight was amazing. You can see the ocean, a lot of mountains, rivers and lakes, but once there you immediately recognize it. This is where the Fellowship discusses which path to go and later hides from Saruman's crows. As there were no artificial props and no CGI, it looks exactly like in the movies and was one of the highlights of our trip. As the whole Moria sequence was shot in studio, we go over to the part where the Fellowship exits the mines. The place where the cry over Gandalf's death is on Mount Owen. This is also only accessible by helicopter, and we planned to go there, but the weather would not allow helicopter rides around the mountain, so we had to skip it. For the next scene, we drove up to the Remarkables, to a ski area near Queenstown. From the parking lot, we took a hike until we reached Lake Alta, a very beautiful location where they shot the Fellowship walking from Moria to Lothlorien, and especially Aragorn as he crosses a small river and sees the woods of Lorien. On the other side of Queenstown, near Glenorchy, you will find Lothlorien, and it's the part where they first enter the forest and meet Haldir. The exact spot is very hard to identify, because a lot of trees were artificial to make them look bigger. Right nearby is a big field, which they used to film the wide shots of Isengard. You can recognize the hill and the mountains in the background. Isengard itself was a very big miniature, which they built on a parking lot, filmed it and placed it inside the shot they made here. A lot of rivers in New Zealand were used for Anduin, and one of them was Rangitiki River in the North Island. We took a boat ride on this river and we felt like the Fellowship when they were chased by the Uruk-hai. Two scenes were filmed here, one where you can see the Fellowship on a river branch and one where you see the Fellowship riding through a canyon. Another shot was done north of Wellington. They shot Viggo Mortensen and also Sean Bean here. They flipped the shot of Boromir to create the illusion that they are riding in a canyon. One of the most famous Anduin shots is where the Fellowship sees the Argonath. This was shot on Kawarau River near Queenstown. The exact spot was hard to identify as it was very windy, so it was a bit dangerous to go near the cliffs. In a beautiful area around the Mavora Lakes, the scenes were shot where the Fellowship camps on the Anduin River before they break up. It took quite a while to get here, and the gravel road is not in the best condition. The scenes where Boromir tries to take the ring and gets killed were not shot here, but near Queenstown. We searched in the woods near Closeburn, but could not find the spot. The scene where Frodo lands after taking off the ring at Amon Hen was filmed nearby, and even if the place is not really recognizable anymore, you can clearly see that it was filmed here if you look at the mountains in the background. When Frodo hides from the Uruks, this was filmed again at Mavora Lakes, just a 5-minute walk from the spot where they filmed the campsite. Just a few meters away, you find the tree where Merry and Pippin were hiding. It has rotten quite a lot in the past 2 decades, but you can still recognize it. By the way, this tree was also used for the shot where the Uruk walk over a tree trunk. The scenes where Frodo is standing at the river and Sam runs into the water to catch up with him were again filmed at Mavora Lakes, as well as the bit where Aragorn, Legolas and Gimli decide to go for Merry and Pippin. This very last shot of the film was again filmed at Tongariro National Park, but as the shot is mostly CGI, we could not find it. Let's continue with the 2 towers. A lot of scenes where Frodo and Sam are in Emin Muil were again shot at Waka ski field, where a lot of Mordor scenes were shot. You will need good shoes to climb the rocks and you need a good eye to find exact locations, because the whole area looks like this. but the longer you look, the more scenes you can find here. Also later in the movie, they did some shots with Gollum here. When the Uruk-hai carry Merry and Pippin, they walk through a canyon. This was shot in central Otago. This is on private land, so you can only visit when you do a tour or know someone who is permitted to enter the area. A bit further up is the Poolbar Reservoir, the lake which was used for the scene where the Rohan village is attacked by the Uruk-hai. This is public, but the road is very rough, so I would not access this road without a four-wheel drive. At Kaitoki Regional Park, which was used for Rivendell, there are multiple rivers which were used to film the scene where Éomer finds Theodred. As the scene is mostly close-ups and you can't access the river, it was hard to identify the exact spot. Back in central Otago, they filmed a lot of Rohan scenes here. When you are in the area, you can almost hear Howard Shore's music. We could not visit every spot here, as also a lot of the running scenes of Aragorn, Legolas and Gimli were filmed here, and some of them are very remote. After the trio meets the Rohirrim, they ride to a burning pile of Uruks. This spot is a bit south of the Mavora Lakes. This is also where Vigo broke, and just a few meters away is the spot where Gandalf calls Shadowfax. In the middle of the South Island is one of the most spectacular places in the whole trilogy. After traveling on a long gravel road for quite a while, you'll find a flat valley with a single hill on it, Mount Sunday. This hill was used for Edoras. The amazing set here took 8 months to build just for a few days of shooting. From the parking spot it takes about 45 minutes to walk to the top of the hill. This has been one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. Besides a small road, the only thing you can see from up there are beautiful mountains, rivers, bushes and trees. Back in the middle of the North Island, just beside a parking lot, you will find a waterfall where Gollum catches a fish. We were there in summer and it was already pretty cold. Hard to imagine how freezing it was for Andy Serkis to do those scenes when it had snow. Just a few meters away, Frodo and Sam have an argument about Gollum and the ring. But as the scene is mostly close-ups and the ruins and rocks are mostly artificial, it was hard to find the exact spot. Near Queenstown, you will find 12 Mile Delta. This area was used for Ithilien, for example for the famous potato scene. A fire destroyed a lot of trees and bushes here, but you can recognize the mountains in the background. Also other Ithilien scenes were shot here, but because the vegetation changed so much, it was hard to find them. Also near Queenstown, you will find the Deer Park Heights. It's a big area with a lot of animals, and it's a gold mine for Lord of the Rings fans. Pretty much the whole sequence of the escape from Edoras to Helm's Deep was filmed here. There are even signs at locations where a film was shot. The wind made it sometimes very hard to get good shots of certain areas. You will need to pay entry and you will need a car to enter the park. A few hundred kilometers further north, Aragorn gets picked up by his horse. The camera was on the other side of the river, but I just took a photo from the side where we parked our car. Back again at Tongariro National Park. There are a lot of information online and in location guidebooks that they shot the scene with Gollum on the waterfall here. To be honest, it doesn't look very much like it, except that it's also a waterfall. So I'm not sure what footage from here they exactly used, but it's still a nice location. The hill where the villagers of Rohan and later Aragorn stand and look down on Helm's Deep was shot just about 10 minutes further down the road from where Edoras was. Even the valley of Helm's Deep is visible from here. Of course, a lot of the shot was changed in post-production. We asked the farmer if we could climb the hill, but due to lambing season, we were not allowed to. This is the last shot for the two towers, as most of the rest of the film, like Helm's Deep, Osgiliath or Fangorn, were shot on sets. Just the very end was shot at the Whitehair Forest in the North Island. But as the forest is very huge and we didn't have any more information besides that, we skipped this location. Let's get into Return of the King. The very first scene with Smeagol and Déagol was filmed at Fernside Homes, and in the past people were allowed to visit it. Unfortunately, by the time of our visit, we weren't. Also the part where the Fellowship departs from Lorien in Fellowship of the Ring was filmed here. We are back in Edoras, where Aragorn and Legolas stand before the Golden Hall while Pippin has a look into the Palantir. Near Mount Cook, the biggest mountain in New Zealand, you'll find the spot where Gandalf rides to Minas Tirith. Of course the White City was a miniature, but they used the mountains here as a backdrop. I did not hit the best angle, as the weather made it already quite hard to leave the car. Just a few kilometers away, they used a different mountain for a different shot of Minas Tirith. In the south of the North Island, we parked our car and in very hot weather took a hike to a very special area. The pinnacles here were used for the Dimhold Road. As the formations lose rocks over time, they don't exactly look as I do in the movies, but the area is clearly recognizable. A small scene where the trio leaves the Path of the Dead in the extended edition was again shot at Deer Park Heights. I wanted to get closer, but I saw deers standing right at the spot where you can see Vigo, so I did not want to disturb them. Fields near the town of Twisel were used for probably the greatest battle in movie history, the Battle of the Pelennor Fields. A lot of the shots in the battle are either close-ups or shot in front of green screens, but others were shot on this exact field and you can recognize the mountains in the background. Once again we are back at Whakapapa ski field on Mount Ruapeo for a small scene where Frodo and Sam get discovered by the orcs before they escape an inspection and make their way to Mount Doom. Also in the Tongariro National Park you can walk the Tongariro Alpine Crossing, which is a beautiful but very long hike. You can see the volcano up close which served as Mount Doom. They filmed the volcano but only used the bottom of the mountain, as the volcano is sacred for the Maori people, so the top part with the lava is always CGI. The scene where Sam picks up Frodo at Mount Doom was also shot somewhere in this area. I didn't find the exact spot, but the view of the volcano reminded me very much of this scene. Almost back to where we began, Hobbiton. The set was first built in the late 90s for the Lord of the Rings movies and then almost completely removed. For the Hobbit movies, they rebuilt the set with permanent materials and it's now a popular tourist destination. And now we are at the end of the trilogy and an amazing adventure. But not quite. Talking about the Hobbit movies, even if our trip was mainly focused on the Lord of the Rings movies, we also visited some Hobbit filming locations. I can very much recommend the Hairy Feet tours. This is a private land on the North Island where they shot a lot of scenes for an unexpected journey. The family which owns the farm is now doing tours. Not only is it a beautiful landscape and the spots are very cool, Susie, who owns the farm with her husband, is a very passionate and awesome tour guide. We did not expect this tour to be one of our highlights, but it was truly awesome. We also visited the spot where the dwarves and Bilbo meet Bard, and the spot where the villagers gather after Lake Town gets attacked by Smaug. Still not tired? I have some more spots which are worth visiting when traveling New Zealand as a Lord of the Rings fan. In Auckland you can visit the Weta Cave, where you can see some actual movie props like armor pieces, and you can buy a lot of merch and of course the Weta collectibles. Another and even cooler Weta Cave is in Wellington. We also did a tour at Weta Workshop. To be honest, when you're a big fan and you've watched the Lord of the Rings behind the scenes as much as I did, there is not too much new to see. But if you're in Wellington, of course it's still very much worth to do the tour. In Wellington you can also visit Stone Street Studios, where they filmed most of the studio work, but you can't actually see much, as all sets were destroyed after filming. Pretty close to the studios is the terminal of Wellington Airport. You can see a life-size Gandalf riding on an eagle, which was built by Weta. This concludes our journey through Middle-earth. Traveling to New Zealand was a lifelong dream, and it was very strange to visit a country on the other side of the world which was unknown to me but still felt so familiar. For me, knowing where they filmed the scenes doesn't take any magic away. Knowing how beautiful some of these places are and how much effort it took the crew to film there made me appreciate the movies even more. I know there are even more places to visit, but I still think we covered quite a lot of Middle-earth. I hope you enjoyed this. You will find more information, exact coordinates and further links in the description. Goodbye and farewell.